did that then. So, yes, unexpected CodeZone stream. I apologise for that. I got things on this evening, so I needed to move it forwards a little bit, and I said I would do one on Sunday, and I have, and here we go. And also, I shall point out, this is probably going to be the last CodeZone for maybe a week or two. I don't anticipate doing one in the coming week. So, who have we got here? We've got Christoph, Magetsub, Dandestein, Slice, Danicron. Hello to you all. And yes, you can see I have now full screened the Space Thing environment too, because I wanted to see what does it look like at other resolutions. And you can see some windows and menus and things. And so I thought it would be useful maybe to have a look at how we're doing that and slowly start to introduce the graphical user interface PegX. Which has been themed in this instance with some sort of arbitrary orange and black theming. We'll have a look at that too. Onigumo69, Poggers. Yeah, it's starting to look okay, I think. Well, orange and blue are sort of opposites on the colour wheel, aren't they? See, it's a genuine windowing system. For those that haven't seen the GUI before, it's still in development. It isn't released yet. It's also ever so slightly transparent too, which I think is pretty cool. Where's the sun? There's the sun. So if I bring the sun to the GUI there, you can see it's actually sort of an on-top menu. It's nice, right? It makes the text goes additive too. Right, some other little improvements which we'll talk about. Remember we were drawing asteroids in the last episode. I have actually now implemented some clipping for the asteroids, so as we zoom out, you might not be able to see these on the stream, but as you zoom so far out, if the asteroid itself is less than 1 pixel in size, it doesn't draw it. And we think we're drawing up to 40,000 asteroids. You'll have to take my word for it. The frame rate is about 300 frames per second. Now that's also crippled somewhat with the GUI system that's running on top. The GUI system is a little bit of a resource hog, but it's okay. It won't get any worse than that, I don't think. Right, let's go. Have a look. Yeah, the old Amber terminals. That was the kind of look and feel I was going for. I was even thinking I might distort them as well. I quite liked that, particularly with things like the menu system. Who have we got? Hermes, hello. Christian, hello. Julian Nichols is hello. Hef, hello. Alta, hello. Sesmek, hello. Yes, I do apologise for sort of an unannounced and earlier stream than usual. Just I've got a few things on this evening. And, well, I wanted to show off sort of the GUI thing. And it is the standard PegX GUI, so you can see a little bit of 3D hinting and things. The buttons don't do anything, and that's because the GUI's not finished. The event system is there, and I wrote it so long ago I've forgotten how to respond to the event, so that might be something we'll have a go at today, actually implementing this reset to origin button. But I wanted to make the stream full screen, so you'll have to let me know if that's better or worse. I know some people like to see the dev environment because they can see the performance counters and that sort of thing, but I think we're getting to the point now where things are getting... I only stream at 720p, so in order to actually see anything, I want to make sure that I'm drawing at a proper resolution. So I've changed the game resolution to 960 by 540, which is actually lower resolution than we've been using before. And the reason for that is that doubles nicely onto the 1080p screen, and hopefully that then gets sampled down to 720 nicely for the stream. So it should look pretty nice, I think. RHK, hello. So yes, we have a GUI, and as you can see, it's a live GUI, so as we move around, at the moment it just displays the camera position. The menu does nothing other than display some default items. I just wanted to make sure that the menu actually worked. Oh, Mushroom Stick, subscription via Twitch. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you, Slice. Yes, I'm glad the stream is looking okay. Now, just to show you one thing. So I've not used Escape because we're using Escape as one of the buttons in the game. So F1 is going to be my instant close. We need to make sure it doesn't sort of kill everything, because this is what I was a little bit afraid of. Yeah, there's a sort of the stream's going to go black in between launching and not launching. That's an OBS thing. It is just capturing the screen, but for some reason there's this sort of black delay between things starting up and closing down. Don't know, and not too bothered either. I think it'll be alright. What we're going to show, I was going to show you just briefly what we can do with the skinning, because a lot of people think that you know, what are the limitations of theming the GUI, because that comes up quite a bit. You don't want to have to use my selection of colours, so there is actually a mechanism for theming the GUI in quite a nice way. And I'm just going to go to where I'm loading the panel here. So this is the onUserCreate function for the main game, and here there's a thing called global theme. Global theme is what it says. You specify colours and combinations of things for the default look and feel of the graphical user interface. But you can actually work on a local level too. So if you choose to, you can tell a control to use its local theme instead. So you can have different coloured buttons, that sort of thing. But if I just comment all that out, it should, he says optimistically, I've not tried this, we should be able to see it sort of run with the default OLC GUI theme instead. Let's have a look. So I'll run that. So again, I think it's going to go black whilst it boots up. Yeah, it goes black. See, I can see it now. But there we go. It takes a second or so for OBS to find it. It's very strange. So that's the default theme, which looks a little bit more like Windows 3.1. So I'm pretty pleased that the theming is working okay there. Unsure about the transparency with the default theme. Obviously in space it gets difficult to see things. But yes, it's nice and easy. You can see there's a 3D effect on things to default the themes. So I'll go back to the orange theme that we're constructing. And in principle, if I change this orange to, say, something else, like magenta. So if I say magenta, potentially we can have it so you can skin the whole user environment. And some people might prefer that kind of colour. So it makes it very easy to start playing with options and things. I know Magetsub's probably all over that, but I quite like the orange colour of Elite. And having it ever so slightly additively blended with the background, I think just adds that nice little touch to it. Yes, like that. What GUI library framework are you using? It's fully custom. It is OLC Pixel Game Engine. Magenta and lime. Every colour scheme looks better than regular Windows. So, yes, okay, I'll have to explain at some point how the GUI stuff works. Oh, hang on, that's no good. Let's put that back. So if you're new to this Twitch stream, you've somehow discovered it. I don't know how people discover this stream without knowing that the channel exists. I have a YouTube channel, and on that YouTube channel I use an engine called Pixel Game Engine. It's developed by the community, actually, around this channel. And it's just a nice 2D graphics engine, but it's hardware accelerated 2D for the most part. Hot pink. Is it custom on the WinAPI? It is. It's actually cross-platform, so it'll work on Linux, Mac, Windows, whatever. Underneath, it uses OpenGL. Hi, do you work as a software engineer? Yeah, occasionally. Technically I'm management these days, but I work in robotics. So the GUI at the moment is not a single header file PegX, although it will be. It is actually quite a lot of stuff. And this particular stream may get a little bit involved because if you start using graphical user interface, it's never as simple as it should be. But I'll show you where we can start from, and we'll start from where it's included in the game engine and work backwards a little bit to show just some basic principles of it. So I have here what's called the GUI manager. And the GUI manager, we just need something that handles the rendering of the GUI framework and the user interface. And I will do a specific video about this in the future, one because this particular extension I think is going to be a popular extension people will use because it adds a whole wealth of new functionality to the Pixel Game Engine. I have a menu bar now. Controls are all just controls. Even the windows are the controls. Everything's basically derived from a class called a panel. And you can choose to associate controls either with the screen, i.e. they have no particular parent, or you can group them into families which become windows. So we can see on the demonstration here we've had this menu bar at the top of the screen, but also this window that we've been free to move around with its own controls internally. How you structure the things is very hierarchical. It is object-oriented programming solution. Richard LH, hello. GUI man. So I've created two objects here. One is a menu object, which is the menu bar, and the other is a custom class here, which is in our space thing namespace, which I've also created a GUI sub namespace for that too. Dialog debug camera. So let's go and have a look at dialog debug camera to begin with. Now because I'm still sort of hacking this together and experimenting, I've been a bit naughty and created it all in the header file. And you can always tell it's sort of prototype stuff when I've got direct file includes like this. It's not very nice, is it? But the dialog itself inherits from a class called window. And you're obliged to sort of fill in a few default functions. I'll have a look how it works. Now, the bit that's going to make certainly a few people in the chat go, what's going on, is that nearly everything that you create, I've found it nice and convenient to create a little factory function for as well, called make. Because there's some there is some preamble required in order to sort of squeeze it into the GUI system to see how it works. But this actually works very well in practice to make the GUIs easy to construct and to make them easy to program. So there's a little factory function. All that's doing really is creating a shared object a shared instance of this particular object, and then it's calling this construct content function in a particular way. And that's just down to how smart pointers work. The smart pointer needs to exist before we can start constructing things, because typically, if we didn't use smart pointers, the this pointer in a class behaves normally, but as soon as you start using smart pointers, it actually behaves in a strange way, and you can't reference this in the constructor like you can with the normal this. It can become quite messy. Let's have a look. When will Pegos be released? Wish you could subscribe and lose these ads. I'm sorry, I mean, I don't choose to run ads on anything, as you know. Twitch just by default puts them in. Did you study computer science in college? I studied a topic called computer systems engineering. That was at university, so college in the UK is a bit different. You leave college at the age of 18. And in university, I did computer systems engineering. In fact, for the first year, I actually did AI, and I didn't like that, so I swapped over to computer systems engineering, and then ended up doing a doctorate in fundamentally AI, I suppose, afterwards. So yeah, didn't like most of my time at university, I must confess. Right, so we were talking about the dialogues here. So when you create a dialogue, the system will automatically call this onConstruct client function, and it's in here that you build your GUI. So your GUI is basically a tree. In this case, we've got a window object, and the window object is containing a static text object, which is a label, and a button text. Now, I need to get some consistency between how I'm naming these things as well. So that's why it's not quite released yet. And you can see I'm using this little make factory function, and works very nicely. It just pings those on. So these are private members of the window. Now, everything's using smart pointers, and there's a reason that everything's using smart pointers too, and that's because of the way the event system works. And that's probably one of the things I want to have a look at today, because I'd like to be able to get to a point where I can actually make pressing the camera button actually reset the camera. The event system is there. I've completely forgotten how to use it, because it was just after Christmas when I started putting all of this together, so it's all gone. Phil, what are we up to today? Well, we're looking at GUIs. I did sort of suggest I would be doing a stream on Sunday because I missed out on Fridays, and I know there's a few people just joined now which have I've missed the start. I'm not going to be doing any CodeZone streams this week, probably for obvious reasons, but it's not going to be on this week, so a week's holiday from my perspective. But I will make sure that the YouTube's extra channel is up to date with the back catalogue of streams. Right, so that's how you construct a GUI. It's actually very simple, and I've got most of the basic controls. I made a prototype GUI system before Christmas, and there were a few more controls in that I've not brought over to the new way of doing things yet. Things such as list boxes and scroll bars and that sort of thing. You've probably seen on the Discord the videos I've passed of those moving around. So in the main application, once you've constructed your GUI, let's have a look, see. So here in onUserCreate, I'm spending some time re-theming the GUI. That's to give it the look and feel for this particular application rather than just using the defaults. And it's much easier to change the global theme rather than changing all of the sub-themes instead. How did I learn programming? The trick is, I think, you've got to enjoy it. If somebody's just said, "Oh, you can get paid well if you're a programmer, go and learn how to be a programmer," then you're never really going to be perhaps very enthusiastic about it. It has to be something that sparks your interest, and for me, it's because it's very rapid. The turnaround, I can create some code and I can see it change something, and then if I don't like it, I can change the code again, and I get this very rapid turnaround. It's very satisfying. It's this like constant rush all the time of seeing the consequences of my actions happen on the screen. In a both positive and negative way, I suppose. What are your thoughts about Win32 API? It's an API. It's not the worst one I've seen. It's not the best one I've seen. They are replacing it, by the way, more or less. It's the new WinRT and WinGUI 3 and all that sort of stuff, so don't get too invested in it, I suppose. Do you think that working on legacy code is overhated? I personally think it's annoying to work on legacy code, but it's a great way to learn what not to do. I don't think it's a great way to learn anything. I know that seems like a really opposite opinion to work on legacy code. Because if you don't know how to program, just being thrown in with somebody else's code is probably not a way to learn, and if anything, it's just a way to stress you out. I mean, nobody likes working on other people's code, right? Fundamentally. Nobody likes that. But it's a fact of life. You will have to at some point. Yeah, replacing the legacy. You'd be surprised how many people get paid to replace the legacy. Do you have any suggestions how to approach to find a topic for a bachelor thesis in computer science? This is again where I'm going to end up getting myself into trouble with sort of answering questions like this. My argument is, why did you take on computer science in the first place if you don't have an idea in head for what it is you want to do with computer science? It's like a lot of people that go on to do postgraduate courses, and they get very disappointed when the postgraduate course, they're just sort of told, right, well, here's some money, here's an office, come back in a couple of years with some results. And the idea of these things is that before you take them on, you've got an idea of what it is you want to contribute to the field. The thing that you're lacking is the tools and the exposure and the expertise. So you want somebody to sort of mentor you through that in order for you to realise your ideas. If you're just expecting university to basically spoon feed you qualifications, then you're in for a shock. Is that going to mess up PG when they change the API? No, I don't think so. Working on other people's code is like sticking your fingers in their brain. Yes, I suppose it is, Alter. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say the best way to learn anything is to go on GitHub and find a big project and try and understand what it's doing. Big projects and things like that on GitHub, they're complicated things, and just starting with them is not a sensible way to start. There you go. Yes, Christoph's absolutely right. The best way to learn is actually just doing something. OLC GUI, is this a very new thing just got here? It's new for... Yeah, okay, it's new. It's new to everybody except me, I think. Yes, I guess this is a bit of a reveal for the GUI framework that I've been working on, because I think we're getting to that point now where we want to start specifying things, and there'll be a lot of... I needed a mechanism to force me to develop this GUI PegX, and that's really, I guess, kind of what Space Thing is about, because we're going to need all sorts of different controls and things in order to facilitate the game inputs that I think are desirable. Right now it's at a very basic stage, though. So what I was doing was I was showing how to create the GUI. So we've talked about how to theme it like this. So here's the menu bar object. Now the menu bar object is just created in place. It uses a rather strange construction. You use this little make factory function again to make a menu, but you don't give it a parent. And instead of null pointer, you specify it's deliberately it's an orphan. It is parentless. So that means it just sort of exists in space. Those who have done GUI programming before will be familiar with the idea that an event that happens sort of gets passed up the tree until something that's interested in that event deals with it, or if nothing's interested in that event, it disappears. It's an irrelevant event. So it's important that there is a parent-child relationship established in a GUI, because you don't want all of the events coming to the top, because that would be a nightmare to actually deal with. Because it's a hierarchy, you kind of want a window probably to deal with its own events. The only events you want to come out of the window are the things that the global game might be interested in seeing. Got to get your hands dirty at some point. It's true, you just get stuck in. You don't have to start with complicated systems like this in order to learn how to code. It's more important that you understand the basic structure of algorithm, the idea that information is processed fundamentally sequentially, and what is the sequence of events required in order to get data looking from one type to the other. It's all you're doing in programming is changing the format of data. When you sell it like that, it's not very sexy, is it? Is this event system used throughout the engine, or it's just the GUI? But any events that sort of are residual events from the GUI are likely to be things that the engine will want to see. So let me just run it for a second before we continue. This might make things a little bit easier to understand. There we go. So I have a button on here. You can see I can press this button. And the thing is, for the most part, if I click a button on a window like this, chances are the window is going to want to do something in response to that button being pressed. So it may be... internally, because the idea is your little window here is fundamentally a small application in its own right. It's going to have lots of different controls on there and ways of inputting data. And so when you click this button, the first thing that'll have a go at trying to answer that button's click is this window. But in this instance, this reset to origin isn't something really this window cares about. What does care about it is the game. So if this window doesn't care about the event that this button has been clicked, that event then goes outside of the window. And outside of the window, well, it's the game engine itself. And the game engine itself probably does care about that event being clicked, because that's the thing that's going to control the camera. So I want to get to a point where we can offset the origin like this. We can click reset to origin, and then the game engine should be able to reposition the camera as necessary. I can't remember if I've got all of the necessary bits and pieces in the GUI framework in order to do that, so we might not get very far today. So I know one of the things I never got around to implementing was what happens when you actually click on a menu item. So I know that there's no facility to actually deal with that just yet, but I think I did implement buttons being able to send events. So we're going to have a play with that, certainly. Okay, Phil, see you later. Remember that events can occur in parallels. They can't. For all how to learn programming in the chat, well, there's a lot going on there, I'm not reading all that. Is there a reason why you chose retain mode GUI over immediate mode GUI? Yeah, retain mode GUIs are better. I get that real im GUI is sort of fashionable, but having to construct it every single frame I don't find as useful. I construct it once and then just mutate it as necessary. Yeah, sorry about that, Alex. Oh, thank you, Carmuglian 2002. The events can't occur in parallel. There's absolutely no way a human can interact with two things at the same time on a computer system that I'm aware of. I mean, I can click this button, but if I'm clicking this button, I'm not resizing the window or moving a scroll bar. But ultimately, yeah, even if, let's say, everything through events, they've got to be serialized in order for you to process them sensibly, particularly in a game environment. So we're not too worried about it. I'm clicking that instinctively, expecting it to close, but we've not implemented what should happen when you click on one of those buttons. So, press my F1 button. You can have a refresh and a button push at the same time. Yes, but one of those is a system-initiated event and one of those is a user-initiated event. And so if your GUI is in any way sensible, those two features are distinct. So to construct the menu, one of the things I was quite pleased with constructing the menus was, well, you construct them like this, right? Doesn't that look cool? You just construct the menu as you want it to be. I was very pleased with that. I posted that on the Discord server and quite a few people went, no, I don't like that at all. But I quite like it, that you can just specify sort of sub-menus by being initializer lists. For me, it works very well. It's not super useful at the moment, and this is one of the reasons I can't respond to the events, is because I don't know. These are going to need identifiers associating with them. It looks good in the code. Waiting in an event for another event to happen is rather... Richard, I think I'm going to ask an awkward question, but have you programmed with an event system before? If you're waiting for an event inside another event, then you've done it wrong. That should never be a situation which ever appears in your system. Yeah, I like it too. The downside is we also are going to need to populate this with identifiers, which is going to make it messy. You shouldn't nest events 20 layers deep. No, you shouldn't. Yeah, and even if you could press both keys at exactly the same time, the driver reading the keyboard will be doing it sequentially. Yeah, hi Diego. Then, if I wanted, we're getting to the point now, getting quite stuck into this. When we start to add the windows to the screen, here we've got my debug camera window. We just make an instance of our GUI with a starting location, and we add that to the GUI manager, and that's it. So we can forget about the menu bar being there. Once we've created our window-derived class, that's it. We add it to the GUI manager. Now, in on-user updates, the GUI manager has some basic things. Fundamentally, it has just 2 lines, although I've decided in Space Thing to draw it to a different layer because that gives me then the ability to tint the GUI as necessary. Now, that might be a cheap way to colorize it with the theme, because I could specify the theme to be all variations of grayscale and then use the tinting to change the colour of it and the transparency at the same time. But GUIs only need 2 things. Firstly, they need to be updated. Now, the update function will handle all of the user input, the key presses, the mouse clicks, the mouse positions, that sort of thing, and will update itself. And then fundamentally we've got draw as sprite. There'll be an equivalent set of draw as decals as well for other different types of environments. But I'm drawing it as a sprite at the moment. Well, I guess if in a way you might be looking at maybe what are you treating like an event like an interrupt? What happens if an interrupt happens inside another interrupt? Well, it's the same as on your processor. In that case, one just doesn't happen, right? Unless your interrupt system's a bit more sophisticated and can sequentially poll through all of the available input pins on your processor and then sort out the interrupts that way. But it's just one of those nasty things. Interrupts have to resolve quickly. But as far as I'm aware, there is no way to get sort of two simultaneous events occurring. And if you have got one event that's firing other events, that's fine too. But of course, if the event fires another event, that secondary event won't happen until the first event has finished, because the event distribution system hasn't got around to it. Now, I guess if your argument could be, should we parallelize that? Potentially that could be parallelized, providing there's no sort of data transactions between the two events. But fundamentally, and this is one of the differences with this GUI system, the events contain no information. And I should have brought that up actually. That's a distinct difference between environments like WX widgets and I believe Qt. I'm not that familiar with Qt. But my event just tells you something has happened. And it tells you which object something has happened on. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the nature of what's happened. GUI man is a shared pointer, but you said this behavior is a bit different for a shared pointer. Could you explain that? Well, as soon as you introduce the smart pointer, you introduce the concept of ownership, and you can't own something really until it's been constructed. So the way around that is to use this enabled shared from this, which we're going to have a look at. Where is it? There we go. So this is actually provided by the standard library. If you know that your shared, if your panel is going to be represented as a shared object, and you want to use the this pointer, you have this enable shared from this. So when you call this, it actually returns a shared smart pointer instead. Instead of the raw pointer. You can always get the raw pointer, of course. But the problem is with this is you can't call this when you're in the constructor of the panel, because nothing yet owns the object because it's not been constructed. So you've got a bit of a conflict there, that it's got to finish being constructed before it can be owned. So it's just a peculiarity to using smart pointers that because smart pointers, forget about memory safety, smart pointers are about ownership. And there's a distinct, I think that's a distinct and often misunderstood difference. Right. Anyway, whilst we're on panel is sort of the fundamental object in the Pixel Game Engine GUI system. It's the one that everything is a panel. So anything that's viewed on the screen, if it's a button, a text box, a scroll bar, a list, anything at all, fundamentally it's a panel, which is a rectangle that's drawn a particular way. And so for a lot of the controls, you take a panel and you override the functions that you're interested in. And so there is sort of the beginnings of this event system here. It's just I've completely forgotten how to use it. And these are all of the user overridable events, which are things that the user can respond to, and they can selectively respond to as well. You don't have to have if you don't have an implementation, then nothing happens. You're not interested in. And this is what I was talking about before with, say, a refresh event and a mouse click event or a button push event. A refresh event, sort of drawing everything on the screen, well, that's handled by, in Windows' case, that'll be the operating system deciding when that's really allowed to happen. And in our case, it's when the fundamental GUI system says, right, well, I'm now redrawing myself. So there's this lower level of events which are handling the I guess the translation from the environment into the program, these mouse move, mouse enter things. And so these need to be handled and processed in a way that the rest of the GUI framework then understands. Yeah, a bit of a head scratcher, Diego Enable shared from this. I couldn't believe it when I first discovered that was the name of the type as well. Isn't it awful? Yes, there is a Discord server. I don't know what the link is off the top of my head. Usually one of the mods will paste a link. It's on basically anything that I've produced anywhere, any video or anything. Probably on the Twitch channel description as well. Web Piraton, hello. Right, so we did all of that. Now, the trouble is I want to get to a point where we can actually see what the events are. And this is the bit that I've completely forgotten about. So chances are we could start coding and nothing works at all. So I'm going to have to sort of dive into the code to try and understand what's going on here. But I believe the GUI manager should, he says optimistically, have a way of seeing which events haven't been processed by other parts of the system. I think this might be the first time I've actually got to the point of externalizing these events. So let's go and have a look at what the GUI manager does and says. GUI manager doesn't have anything there. That's not an encouraging start, is it? Let's have a look for. So I did actually start adding some comments as well. Now the plan is when this becomes a Pixel Game Engine extension, it will just be a single file to include. I've developed a little utility which will glue all of these together into a single header file. It's just easier to develop with the separate files like this. So I'm looking for events. So I have two types of event in this system. The first is interactions, which crudely are the way the user wants to interact with the GUI system. So an interaction might be the dragging action of dragging a window around the screen or resizing. Other things that we have are floating and sinking panels. Let me just boot the GUI up again and sort of describe the difference between these two. So any window or any panel shown on the screen, we'll have two here. So there's two panels currently on the screen. There's this floating window and there's this menu bar. But quite a lot of controls, when you click on them, need to create what I've called a floating window. That could be the same as like a right-click pop-up menu or something like that. But you'd be surprised just how many different controls there are that do require that sort of behavior. For example, if I click on this menu, this that's popped up is now a floating panel. And it doesn't physically exist in the same classification as these other panels, because if I click somewhere else, they disappear. So floating panels will always exist in a hierarchy of their own. So I can click on Preferences. This has opened another floating panel. Now, if I click anywhere, the whole tree collapses because the floating panel tree has lost focus. But I can go back and click, well, it says optimistically, click an earlier item. If that had a submenu. Have I got one with two submenus on? I don't think I have. But we can see this one does retain focus because it's still allowing me to highlight the commands. So it's any events that are occurring to any objects that are senior in that tree, as in parents in that tree, will get those events. I think that's what I wanted to sort of say. So the floating panel system is different to the regular window system, because the regular window system is responds to all events that are going on at any one time. So these are the act of popping up a floating window. That's an interaction. That's not the same as a notification. Just a second, I'm going to catch up with some of the chats. Can sprites or decals be put in that menu panel? At the moment, yes and no. Let's forget decals just for the time being. Yes, everything's going to have a decal equivalent. But if you, for example, I have a menu item. Sorry, this is what I've called a quick menu. So no, not necessarily as easy on this one, but there will be when I bring in my list boxes. They're a little bit more sophisticated. So yes, you'll be able to have images in those, but there's nothing stopping you overwriting your own menu item element to support a picture, and that's exactly what I've done with buttons. So if I go to buttons, I've created a button base class which will always behave like a button. It's the thing that handles the events, and you can specify the button to be momentary or latching. So then I wanted two different types of buttons. One is button with text. So this is a button that it uses all of the pre-existing button code to function and draw itself, but all I've done is override, well, it should draw some text in the middle. And then likewise I have a button image, which takes in an OLC sprite as an image source. In fact, the little close button on the window is the button is a button image. We'll need emoji support, will we? Right, button icons are an interesting thing. Thinking about things like a resource icon with a number next to it. Right, one of the things with a PEGX is you don't want to sort of also be distributing extra files. So for all of the core things that you may have noticed in this GUI, again, boot it up again. So here I've got a little window closing X. Just wait for that to pop up. Window closing X. That's obviously a sprite. That's an image button. Here I've got an arrow to the right. In fact, I need to make sure that gets drawn the opposite colour. I've got an arrow to the right to indicate that there is some sort of submenu that can appear. These are images of some description. But where are those images coming from? So in my theme, I have a theme header file. There's two sort of static resources here. One is the global theme, which is this object here, and all of the objects created, every panel created has its own local theme. So you can choose, I mentioned that earlier, you can choose whether you want it to be global or local theme. There's also this glyphs utility. This is a glyph singleton, and this exists to allow us to transport imagery without needing to do additional files. Because if I go into the CPP file, basically they are specified as single bit bitmaps for the imagery that's required to make the GUI function. So these could be changed as well and overloaded. But I just thought it's a convenient way. And right now they're done like this so I can physically draw them out. This one's the downward arrow. So if I find the X closed, there I can just about make out that that's an X shape going on. So these are loaded, and then they get automatically converted into sprites by the system upon creation, and they're just used as and when you need them. So you can see there's a little lambda function, creates the sprite of a particular size, just iterates through the data, setting the background and foreground. So button icons, not a problem at all, and I agree. So the menu bar at the top is of one sort of menu type. In fact, the menu bar, let's do it again, let's boot it up again. One of the things I've been trying to do is reuse the tech as much as possible. So this menu bar is in fact no different to this menu here, except this menu bar is designed to be drawn horizontally, whereas these are designed to be drawn vertically. They're actually the same control. So it just keeps things under control, keeps the things familiar to the programmer. So I need to work out where in my GUI here, debug camera, I'm sticking everything in the header file for that, aren't I? Bad. So I have in my custom Windows dialog this on notification. So the notification will happen when, for example, the button is pressed. Maybe there's a way to actually visualize this. So if I just tell this not to be full screen for the moment, let's just make sure that that's remains visible and we can see what's going on. You're right, Alex, that's it. Basically, if there was a function in there that determined whether you had two overlapping circles, then it becomes an engine, according to some people. Absolutely bonkers. Right, so that's the actual size there. So it has shrunk down a little bit. You can see the frame rate is quite happy. And whilst it's zoomed out like this, we can also show the clipping algorithm working, because if I get to a point where we're drawing as many as possible, yeah, so we're still drawing all of these decals dipped below 100 frames per second. But if we zoom out even further, it now understands if an object is too small to be drawn. We can zoom right in, and of course, as you know now, you can zoom right in. It's quite high level of detail that's going on. I think there's enough asteroids there to be meaningfully dense and fun to play with. Now, there's all sorts of things going on here. So that to test the GUI stuff, I've been putting messages in, so we can see when panels are created and when they get destroyed. Now, one of the reasons I chose to use smart pointers in this instance, the real reason is actually going back to the event system. Is the event tells you something has happened. What you don't want is in between you handling that event and the object that emitted that event disappearing. Because then if you go and handle the event but the original object is no longer there, you're going to run into trouble. So the event carries along a shared pointer to the object that caused the event to happen. That means you can process the event as normal, even if you know that the shared pointer's object is going to disappear. It doesn't matter. Okay, you waste a little bit of computation, but at least you're not going to be causing sort of all this invalid operations on objects that no longer exist. And that's quite an important thing with a GUI. If you've used things like WX widgets, you'll know that they don't like you manhandling the child-parent relationship between the objects too much, because it does sort of do something similar. It needs to make sure that the objects exist before it can say, well, it's time to close yourself down, buddy, that sort of thing. So that's why everything's handled as shared pointers. It also allows me to use weak pointer, and I've become a fan of weak pointer. Right, so what I wanted to do was just make sure, because I don't know if any of this still works, is adding into the... Oh, I keep clicking on that. Definitely need to move that over. On notification here. So I'm just going to throw something out into the wilderness, just to make sure that we're getting something when a notification occurs. Now, there's all sorts of things that are going to be throwing out notifications, if any of this does actually work. If it doesn't work, then we're probably not going to get very far doing this on stream. Because all I've done basically is pull in the GUI files and just modify slightly one of the windows from my prototype GUI environment. There's nothing wrong with new and delete, and I like the idea of smart pointers being used in something like a GUI framework. It just makes for very verbose syntax. That's why I wanted to have things like this factory function to sort of tidy up the creation of all the smart pointers. You know, this is very wordy now. Yeah, we could reduce it with some custom types and that sort of thing. And I'm sure if people start using the PegX in anger, they'll do exactly that. Now let's just see what's happening with this notification now. Oh, that's no good. Launch that again. I think I've got an uninitialized variable somewhere in release mode. So that's why we've got that going on. Okay, so we do actually get... I've put /n and standard endl, haven't I? I was wondering why I was getting space. So we do actually get that there is a notification occurring when we're clicking the button. So that's a good start. So if I go to here, what I can check for is what object on this window actually sourced that notification. So if the source panel happened to be my button camera reset, that's the weak pointer. How was I doing this in my prototype one? Just a second. Just having a look to see how I was actually doing the making sure that one of the objects was of a specific type. Now the prototype one, I dropped some videos in the Discord server a short while ago. There we go, that's what I'm looking for. It's got menus, use updates, on notification. I've got this terrible feeling that that might be it. That might be as far as we can actually sensibly get without digging into the real guts of this. Oh, okay. No, there we go. So because this is coming over as a weak pointer, in order to do anything with it all, and this is one of the reasons I quite like weak pointer, if this source panel has ceased to exist, one of the things I can't do is then go and lock it. Right, so I can secure that as a resource whilst I'm working with it. And then, okay, if the resource ultimately disappears later on, fine. But right now, if I need to do some work with it, it's all locked up. Yeah, probably it's not as thread safe as it could be, but there's no multiple threading going on here, so it'll be okay. You need a new CPU. Compilation is starting to take along. My PC is now 7 years old, so yeah, probably do. But you can't buy anything at the moment, can you? You know, my biggest fear is my graphics card burning out right now. What would you do? So that should now only click when we... I'm going to get rid of the standard end alert. When we click the button, so that's a good thing. But I think in this case, yes, it's returning false. Now I need to remember what this returning false means. So all of the event handlers can return true or false, and I can't remember if that means has it processed the event or hasn't it? Because if it's handled the event, I think it returns true, which stops the event propagating any further. If it's not handled the event, these notifications are all queuing up somewhere, and they must be queuing up in the GUI manager, I guess. Because here I'm checking for the interactions, but I don't think I do the equivalent for notifications, and that might be where I need to start working on next, I think. Yeah, it looks like it. The GUI manager is actually quite a complicated thing that's handling the events and drawing in a specific order. But here I have it's going through. You can for now we can assume that interactions are very similar to notifications. I just need to expose them. That it iterates through all of the panels we've added to the GUI framework. It updates them, but then it goes to check does it have any interactions left over. If it does, interactions are only ever handled by the GUI manager. They're never exposed to the end user. So that's like an internal messaging system. I think I need exactly the same now for the external event system, which is what I've not got. So whereas I do an update here, I could probably have to do the same for while panel has notifications. But the thing is, a lot of the notifications are going to be handled internally. So the notification is ultimately going to be bounced back to the window that it's sourced from. Notifications that aren't handled by the GUI system are the ones that we need to bubble to the top and handle in the framework here. So I'm going to just hack for a moment. I'm going to assume that this bit of code kind of exists, and I'm going to have a go at trying to make it work manually if I'm lucky enough to be able to do so. So let's have a look in our main here. We know that the window is mdialog debug camera. If that has notifications, so we're kind of skipping a step here. While has notifications, I've even forgotten what all of these functions are going to be. mdlg debug camera. Get next notification. That looks like a useful function to have. We'll just call that auto n for now. Now, I'm going to have a quick glance at that just to see what's going on because I can't remember. Right, so that's just popping the first thing off the list. That's actually going to tidy up the notification for us. Good, that's what we want. And then I can choose what to do with the notification. So switch n dot. Right, let's go and have a look at what is a notification. So interactions actually says here, users have interacted with the system in Subway, mouse and keyboard input. So this, like, interactions are internal. Notifications are this sort of dataless event that's going to be moving around the system. So the idea is you get this very small notification. All it does is saying this control has changed. And you have to then be responsible for interrogating that control. That's different to things like WX widgets, which will actually tell you this control has changed and here is how, and this is the data that's changed. Now you might think, well, that second system is a lot more useful to you. The downside is it requires incredibly complicated construction code in order to make it work. By reducing the complexity to just being, well, something has changed, and then you go and work out what has happened, then that's much easier. I do give you some hints though, because I do say there are different types of notification. This is the activity of the notification. So if it's a command, this would be, for example, a button has been pressed. A state change might be something like a checkbox has changed state, or a toggle button has changed state. Value change as the value of a text box change, or the value of a scroll bar changed. That sort of thing. So it tells you the nature of how the control has changed, but you've then got to go and get the data and respond to it yourself. So let's have a look at that. So we know that we're going to get a command change, I think, from pressing a button. Let's go and have a look. Where are we going? Main. So I guess you probably want to check if the command has actually come from the button itself. We could customize the event potentially. We could customize the dialogue to output something that the game engine cares about. But I'm just testing a few things now. So I won't be able to test directly if the notification has come from the button, because the button is currently private to the dialogue. But let's just see what happens. So if we've got n dot get activity. In fact, I'm going to not do it with switch because I don't know how many of these things we're going to have to go through. So if m.get activity equals OLC GUI, I have to come up with a tidy way to do these. Notification activity. Whoa, well, you can tell it's modern C++ straight away, can't you? So if that's a command, then let's output something there too. We'll set that to camera reset. Now, the idea is that you would only interrogate the GUI manager for this sort of information. You wouldn't interrogate the dialogue directly. And any events that have sort of leaked outside of the GUI are going to be relevant to the game engine. So there's a few little sort of our own internal rules we're breaking with this code. What is this GUI library? Yep, this is PegX for GUI. Fearless Cobra, how's life? Life is, well, yes, riddled with anxiety at the moment, I think is the sensible way to describe that. I think you're right, Richard. You've just got to get any old junk, anything you can find, just to get something on the display. I'm fortunate that I don't really require 3D graphics very much. Yeah, Danny Cry, it's an exciting PegX. It is almost finished, and I've got sort of 3 more controls which I've already written in my prototype that I want to bring over to it. Then squash it all into one file, and it should be ready for release. The downside is it's a complicated one to learn how to use. So whereas a lot of the PegXs, there's really only 3 or 4 functions. This is a PegX that's coming out with a good 10, 15 subclasses attached to it, and it's getting into the mindset of how to develop interactive frameworks using it. What are you making? We're making Space Thing, which is a sort of Sims Anno in space. And right now we're testing the event system on the GUI framework just to make sure that it's working. So we can try that. So what I'm hoping to see is when I click the button, there we go. So we've got notification and camera reset. So the notification was further up in the chain, if you remember. So that's the dialogue outputting the window. Outputting the text, and camera reset is the game engine outputting the fact that the event has occurred. So that means we should be able to specify a particular location for the camera system. Now, I want to try and make it so it can scroll there. Now, how did we do that? I think that depends on what mode you're in as well. It's very easy for me to just say set the camera to a specific value, but instead what we actually want to do is tell the camera to move to a particular location. So I think the way to do that, if I recall correctly, and it was a while ago, is to specify the lerp time. Hopefully we're in free pan and zoom mode, which I guess we're probably not. Oh, it would be selected pan and zoom mode. So free pan and zoom mode, I'm going to have to just set the world offset to 0, 0. Yeah, let's just try setting that directly, since we've not much time left on the stream. So TV dot set world offset. Oh, I've not got my OBS up, so that was Martin Steed, subscriber prime. Thank you very much, much appreciated. I'm just catching up with the chat. When I go quiet and stir like this, it's me reading up some of the chats. Can a line be considered a shape? I see conflicting information on a line. I think yes, sensibly it probably can be. Right, I want to set the camera's location. So set my world offset for the transform view. We're going to set to... I think we just want to set to that, right? Ooh, I don't know. I think that's what we want to do. Because if I set the world... Well, let's just try 2 things. So if I set the world offset directly to 0, 0, that's going to put the star of the solar system directly in the top left of the screen. But we can try that. And see if we actually need to offset it a little bit. So we'll run that, we'll move that out the way, and if I click reset to origin, yep, so that stuck it up in the top left. But the nice thing, that was our button that handled the change, albeit in a slightly clumsy way. So let's just specify that. I've got a feeling it's got to be a negative, is it? Can't quite remember here. So click on you. Yeah, there we go. Right, I'll make this full screen again so we can all see it nicely. Start. I can never remember which one of these is which. Full screen is the first one, right? So we've got our sun and we've got the ability to position the camera in different locations. I can move this slightly. Let me just pull my OBS up. It's a bit difficult when I can't see what you guys can see. Yeah, I can stick that there. So the dialogue itself is now updating automatically, and if I click the reset to origin button, it's moved the solar system back to its center point. So we've sort of tested that we've got input both ways into the GUI system, although the way we're extracting the fact that that button has been pressed is a little bit more long-winded than I expect it to be when we've actually finished building the GUI system. That said, to those that have just joined, this is the space thing, so we've got various space stuff going on. I don't know what happens if we start doing things like selecting a planet. Oh, that's a moon. Let's select a planet. And we can reset to origin. Yeah, it shouldn't do anything because we're in a different camera mode. Now, all sorts of weird things might happen when I click away. Okay, good. It doesn't. So the system is proving to be robust in its own right, and that's one of the advantages of using state machines like we have done. So I can select the planet. Let's just because people haven't seen, maybe we're going to put a space station of some description in there. Let's build up a quick satellite. I quite like building satellites. There's something really therapeutic about it. Now, whilst you're editing the satellite, if you didn't know, space is still going on around you. It's just we've changed what the camera is interested in looking at. So that's why it looks like we're in a static backdrop. Let's put some solar panels on there. And click elsewhere. Very nice. Now we've got it so that they only draw the asteroids when we're in free select mode, which is a bit of a strange decision. That was from the previous episode. We never updated it since. Have you tried Rust? Yes. What's your opinion about it? Not much. This is sure some special space stuff indeed. Yes, it is. We can click reset to the origin now as well. We can always find our way back to the start. So that's quite nice. Is this a solar system simulator? Not really. It's going to be so it's more about the logistics of trading in space, that sort of thing. So you may have another object with a couple of space stations floating around it. And the idea is we're going to look at building space stations with logistics chains that we need to worry about. So we can look at the logistics of transporting things around a moving framework like this. So imagine kind of like the Anno games, that sort of game, but with constantly evolving road networks and sort of transportation things. But one of the reasons on this series, everything you see so far has been developed on stream, except for some of the GUI technologies, and we're getting to the point now where we've got the basic user interface requirements done. It's time to start thinking about what the game itself is going to be. I can select the thing. I like the thing. We've got the camera sorted out. I think we're kind of settling on a graphical style that we think is good. It's time to start thinking about the game. Do you think that .NET JVM is a benefit to the abilities of a normal programmer? No. I think nobody cares whether it's running on a virtual machine or the actual hardware anymore. Even on actual hardware, it's pretty difficult to cause damage. He says. I'm sure that there are ways, but if there are ways, but you have to go out of your way now to actually cause problems. Right, so this will be the last CodeZone for at least a week. Obviously, I've got quite a busy week planned this week, so there won't be anything on Tuesday, Friday, or Sunday, and I probably won't be around on the Discord very much either. I think that's it. I'm quite pleased that the GUI is working. I'll tell you what I will do. Or maybe we should do it now. Should we compile this to then upload into the browser version and see if it works on there? Yeah, let's do that just before we disappear. So let's... is it going to compile all of the GUI stuff? There's a link. Has anybody got the link? What's the link for the space thing? Let me try and find it. Coder.com /members/JumpyDex9 /space thing. Now, if I click on... Nope, I got that one. Got something wrong in there. There we go. Right, okay, so I'm going to put a link in the Twitch chat. This link is the Pixel game engine that I use, the technology for the graphics here, can compile to run in your browser as well. Now, a lot of you will already know that. What I will do after this stream is I'll compile this in such a way that you can play with it at that link. So that link kind of reflects the latest demo of things. It's a little bit out of date, actually, that particular link, but it's good enough. So if you can follow that link, you can actually sort of try this for yourself in the browser. It runs quite well in the browser. I will then go and compile this now with its GUI into that format. It shouldn't be too difficult. I just need to tell the Emscripten compiler where all these CPP files are. They're not where they usually should be. And then I can compile it for Emscripten. Yeah, it's using Emscripten to compile to WebAssembly for that, yeah. It takes about 10 seconds to load, depending on your connection, because I think it's about 30 meg of data for it to download. Most of that's image data, which isn't used, sadly, so it could do with being optimized a little bit. Right, okay, that is it for the week. Thank you very much for following along today. I will be on the Discord for a little bit, but then for the rest of this week, potentially not around too much. All the best for the cloning chamber. Yes, I will pass on your concerns, regards, condolences. I don't know what the right word is. Anyway, until then, take care of yourselves and see you later. Bye-bye.